Hey, well, hi everybody. Today is my first video, and just gonna thought I'd say hi. So, what am I gonna talk about today? Let's see. I killed the big screen for a second. Um, yeah, I think what I want to talk about is basically how how a childhood can impact your life. I think that's a good thing to talk about. Yeah, a lot of people grow up with a lot of limitations in their lives. Um, a lot of the time, yeah, it's taken me a long time to wake up and to kind of realize that opportunities are here to be taken. Um, hmm, I was watching the movie there recently. I can only imagine, and it gave me a really good idea of I think my life story. Um, a story about a guy who grew up with quite a difficult dad, put it mildly, and yeah, this affected his behavior, affected the way that he was living, and he basically he was trying to get into it's about the band called Mercy Me, Christian band. But basically, he wasn't doing very well in music, and he was good, but he just wasn't good enough to get a contract. And so basically, yeah, the manager of the band turned around and said to him, "Listen, son, you're running from something. What are you running from?" And your man said, "I'm running from his dad." And so the manager said, "You can't run all your life." So I like this movie because I certainly feel like as if the two biggest things that happened in my life was my dad dying when I was 6, and then dealing with dealing with some of the stuff that some of the anger issues that my mom had. Um, yeah, trying to I've been surprised at how much of my life it's taken me to recover from this. It's a lot of drinking. Yeah, but anyway, recently started to study counselling, and not that recently, a couple of years ago. But so much of my studies are about trauma, and so much of the trauma that seems to be coming up in my personal counselling is all about the violence, really, I suppose, that I experienced at the hands of my mum at a young age. Yeah, we've never really had much conversations about this, me and my mum. You know, I don't think she really has any idea how much damage her mother did to her. Uh, but we started talking about it a bit more in my family, amongst myself and my sisters and that. So yeah, we got kind of wiped out on one hand by the death of my dad, and we got wiped out on the other hand then by the anger and unavailability, I suppose, emotional unavailability of our mom. So yeah, in the middle of all that, we've got 30 years of drinking and a lot of years of high performing at school academically, but very low performing at school in terms of sporting ability and that, because yeah, I just wasn't really physically there. I don't think I was kind of like a little bit disconnected from my body. I know it's a funny thing to say, but it's kind of how I experience things. I was kind of very frightened person, very frightened boy growing up. So yeah, things that have helped me to recover has been 20 years of counselling, 3 years of studying counselling, but also 9 years of being a Christian. And so yeah, one of the things that I learned being a Christian and that I learned in the last 9 years is that God has a plan, and that God makes us all in His image, and that we're all wonderfully and powerfully made. And certainly that wasn't the narrative that I got growing up. You know, what I felt growing up was that I didn't matter, that I wasn't important, that I wasn't um, worthy of anything, and that I shouldn't be even take any. You know, there was nothing special about me. There was nothing to celebrate about me. I never really got the feeling that there was anything worth celebrating about me growing up. So it's very different to the Bible, to what's said in the Bible about each of us. You know, um, yeah, from some great teaching in the church that I was going to, City Impact. You know, I got to hear that Jesus died on a cross for me. Um, Certainly, that wasn't preached to me when I was a child going to a Catholic school and even an altar boy. I never really got told by anybody, not even the priest, that Jesus died on the cross for me. Um, the other thing that I never got told was that Jesus was resurrected on the third day. I got told that, but I never got told that the relevance of that was that we could, you know, we could call on Jesus. He wasn't just dead; he was alive, and that we could call on Jesus on a daily basis for help. Prayers were something that was more or less just kind of wrote words. I didn't really hear them as direct expressions of hope. You know, putting my trust in a God. Nobody ever told me that you could put God first in your life, and that was kind of the way to have a happy life. I always heard the woulds and the shoulds and the, you know, we should put God first. That God, you know, honor thy father and the mother. You know, thou shalt not have false gods before me, rather than put all your money on God and you'll have a happy life. You know, that wasn't the way that Christianity was taught. Whereas I can see, you know, that Jesus was a winning lottery ticket. You know, that was never exactly mentioned in my Catholic theology. And that's kind of my own interpretation. But I think I've discovered in the last 9 years that when you find Jesus, you have actually found a winning lottery ticket, because he's our ever-present help. He's our ever-present hope. And you know, he's the way, the truth, and the life, right? So when he's your provider, you can kind of pretty much step off the treadmill and into kingdom living, which is one of the biggest teachings, I suppose, that I've really started to realize is this concept of stepping off the treadmill of life and stopping striving for worldly things. I had somebody preaching tonight, just at a kind of community meal thing, and he was saying that, like, you know, the world will teach you a certain way of living and a certain way of looking at things, and it's, you know, it's all about material gains. But but kingdom living and Christianity teaches you of a life, of an eternal life, but it also teaches you of an eternal relationship with God, who is the creator of heaven and earth. So basically, you've got the most powerful ally in the world, helping you through your life. When you lean into Jesus, when you give him your burdens, you know, he says, "All come to me, all those who are heavily burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke, which is light." So, you know, I spent, I suppose, 45 years of my life going around, 46 years of my life going around heavily burdened, with no significant faith. And the last 9 years of my life I've spent with a growing faith, and I've been able to take my burdens off and basically take God's burden, which is basically his burden is to spread the word of the power of God, of the reality of God. So it's been a wonderful 9 years for me to step out of the world and off the treadmill and into kingdom living, which is basically a life of trusting rather than trying, a life of filled with hope. I think somebody tonight said it very well. He said that you get healed from the inside out, and I feel that's been my experience is of is of a healing that comes from the inside out. Sort of like as if God, 9 years ago, when I accepted Jesus into my life, when I made a decision to put Jesus first, it's like as if I kind of reset the priorities in my life, and it's taken 9 years to kind of work this through into the exterior of my life, into the actual day-to-day functioning of my life. But it's definitely been a wonderful, glorious journey, and I've had lots of people encouraging me. Lots of teachings. Joyce Myers, Joel Osteen. To name but a few. Listening to Shine, watching Shine television, Christian movies on Shine, listening to Star Radio, Life FM over here, Rema Radio over here in New Zealand. Just different people. Chuck Swindoll, pastoring in America, John Bevere, there's another one that I can't remember, Samuel something or other. But there's just so many different preachers. Joyce Myers, as I said earlier, Bobby Schuller. Listened to these people at different stages. David Jeremiah, consistently teaching of the goodness of God, of the reliability of God, of the rock that we can stand on. Reading the scriptures, the Psalms. Pastor Peter Mortlock here in City Impact Church has been phenomenal, and Bev Mortlock and Terry Mortlock and Mark Mortlock. Pastors Greg Crawford, Joe Manasseh. They've just been phenomenal, the impact that these people have had on me. More recently, going to Catch the Fire and listening to people's experience. I feel like as if I've joined a massive couch surfing family, where you can basically just go from anywhere to anywhere. Anywhere I go now, I just look for a church, pop in. Recently, I was in, not that recently, but about a couple of years ago, I was up in Russell, and I just dived into a local church for a Sunday service, and I heard one of the greatest services that I've ever heard, really. Well, not really, but it was just a poignant message on, God being in the darkness in the very first chapter of Genesis, that, darkness was over the earth, and God was in the darkness. And this pastor was saying how, he sort of found himself slipping into depression at times, but it was really comforting to realize that God was in that depression. If God was in the darkness that was at the beginning of the earth, at the beginning of time, well, he said, if then what darkness could he find that God isn't in? So it was very encouraging. I think that message only really dawned on me a couple of months later, actually, when I was thinking about it. But I just thank you, Lord, for my beautiful Christian friends. I've had some amazing Christian walks, out at night, just going out and talking to God and to the stars and that. And I'm an amazing flatmate whose knowledge of the Bible and knowledge of Christian history was incredible. I discovered that the Ark was found up in Mount Ararat in the Turkish mountains. This was a massive realization for me. The Ark was actually real, that there's a real Ark that was found halfway up a mountain in Turkey. I mean, it's quite significant, and it's exactly the same size as the Ark that's mentioned in the Bible. This is massively significant, that the remains of the Egyptian army who were going across the Red Sea is actually there. You can see crustaceans in the middle of the ocean, where the chariots basically floundered when the sea came and swamped the Egyptian army that were chasing after the Israelites, which is all recorded in the book of Exodus. Another significant thing is realizing that it's 170 generations from Adam and Eve to now, as accounted in the book of Numbers, and I think it's also in the book of Luke, which talks about the different generations. There's 10 generations from Adam and Eve to the flood, 10 generations from the flood to Abraham, 10 generations from Abraham, I think, to the great dispersion. Just can't remember exactly, but 10, 10, 10, and then basically 45 generations from Abraham to Jesus. And then approximately 100 generations from Jesus to now. So in total, about 170 generations from Adam and Eve to now, which is incredibly short. It's quite amazing, really, when you consider that most of us can kind of go back 3 or 4 generations, if not more. That you only have to go back 170 generations to the beginning of time. Of course, we are taking into account that before the flood, people lived 900 years, and after the flood, most of the generations were about 120 years. Well, the people lived till they were 120 years, but the generations were every kind of 20 years, something like that. So that's my first little intro. Just wanted to start the ball rolling. I'm looking at a movie called Selfie Dad, which inspired me. Yeah, but I think that it's one thing that we were talking about on Sunday last, which was being preached about, was like the inherent creativity that's in each person and the inherent individuality of each created person. And when we stop actually just trying to be one of a group and actually, discover what your individual gifts and talents are, what your individual calling is, what your individual creative gifts are, that you can actually start to experience life more fully. I think I've been so busy trying to sort of fit in and blend in that I've never really kind of got to know myself. Yeah, so it's time to I feel like it's time to start to tell my story and talk about my life and start to, live the life that I was made to live. Okay. God bless. Thank you, everybody.